Dean Stott, welcome to the Amy Is Show. I am so excited to dive into your background. You're the first Army person I've had on my show. And you're the first British guy I've had on my show.
Oh, wow.
And I'm so excited because we have so much in common, even just from our journeys. You were 17, I think, when you joined the service.
That's it, yeah, 17.
And I was 17 as well. We're both from England, even though my accent is totally throwing everybody off. It's an identity crisis for me. But I actually wanted to join the Royal Army myself.
Oh, really?
So I didn't. I ended up joining the American Army, which is a whole story in itself. But you're probably one of the coolest people I've ever talked to be honest with you.
No, not at all.
No, seriously. I'm so excited. Your whole background is so fascinating. You've obviously at this point, you're a published author. You are on an amazing new show, Toughest Forces on Earth. And did I say that? The name of that right?
That's right, Toughest Forces on Earth. Yeah, people get mixed up. People sometimes say Will's Toughest Forces, but no, you got it right. Toughest Forces on Earth. Yeah.
Awesome. And that show, for those of you that don't know, that haven't seen it yet, it's on Netflix. He goes around the world with a couple of other guys, and he tests out the toughest trainings in all of the military services around the world. So just such a cool thing. And on top of that, you were SBS through the Royal Army, though, right?
Through the British Army, yeah. So I didn't go the normal traditional route. SBS primarily used to be 100% Royal Marines. So I went the non-traditional. So coming from the Army, I should have gone to the Special Air Service, the SAS, which is the more famous of the two units. But because I'd spent 8 years with 3 Commander Brigade with the Royal Marines in the reconnaissance force, and I was also now the senior diving instructor for the Army. I just had a fondness for the water. And actually, when I decided to do Tier 1 selection, SBS had just opened up their recruitment to the Army as well. So much to the disgust of my friends in the SAS, I did that. I went for the SBS. But unlike, for the listeners here, unlike the US military setup, where you have Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, which is your Tier 1 equivalent, their selection is individual. They have their own selections. Ours, SAS and SBS, is joint. We only have one, so there's no easier one than the other. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your journey getting in just for a moment, because I feel like there's such connection for me. And I know a lot of my audience joined the military young. I was actually a recruiter for a while for the Army here in the US. And so I distinctly remember a lot of the people we would focus on recruiting were young kids that were literally in high school. We would get them while they were in high school still and put them in a recruit sustainment program until they graduated. And then we would also focus specifically on wrestling schools or football teams or whatever. We would develop relationships to recruit them young. So I want to talk about that a little bit, if you're okay, just kind of starting there. So in your book, which if you guys have not read it yet, Relentless, Dean Stott, go grab it. It is such a crazy read. You talk about your journey, just kind of leaving school. You weren't exactly sure what you wanted to do. You were on vacation, and you kind of did what I did too. You pissed your dad off and went rogue. But you joined the military. So
joined the military, yeah. My father was in the military. My grandfather and his brothers were all in the military. So I was born into a military family, and actually, because my father was in the military, every 3 years we would move to a new town, new city, or new country, whether it's Germany, UK, but also within that military environment. So in the UK, they call us pads brats, which means your father's in the military, so you're a military child. And my father's last post was Aldershot, which was the home of the British Army. So you had the parachute regiment there, you had the Army catering corps, the Royal Logistic Corps. It was almost like Fort Bragg, but on a smaller scale. And so I was immersed in that environment, but I never really had any aspirations of being in the military myself. I always wanted to be a fireman growing up as a young boy. If you asked me what I wanted to be, it was a fireman. And my father, his career wasn't the career that I ended up doing. My father was what we call a tracksuit soldier. So something you touched on there with recruiting, you targeted schools where there's sport, where there's wrestling. The military was an alternative option for those who may not have actually made it professional. Because I know when I know we have famous boxers who went professional, we have famous soccer players who went professional from their time in the military. So it is a platform for them. And my father was the Army. I say he's like the Ted Lasso of the Army, but now I've watched Ted Lasso. He's nothing like my father.
I was going to say, that's awesome. I would love to have your dad if he was Ted Lasso. That's amazing.
Nothing like Ted Lasso, but he was the Army soccer manager, player, and coach. So he never really had a uniform. His uniform was tracksuit. and trainers and soccer boots. And as you touched on, I went to, when I finished school at the age of 16, you can't join the fire brigade until you're at least 18. And I went to college, and then in 1993, I think there was a recession in the UK, and just for one fireman's job, there was 2,000 applications. So I was like, I'm going to have to go away and get some career advice, or I'm just going to have to, do something else. I can't just go straight into that. So I went to college, and I didn't really like college. I went on holiday with a few of my friends surfing down in Cornwall. That's where my fondness on the water comes from. My father used to always take us away on surfing holidays. And I was supposed to come back after 2 weeks. My father, dropped me and my friends off long before the mobile phone, and ended up picking us up 2 weeks later, but I wasn't there. I ended up staying. I ended up actually starting off as a silver service waiter in a local hotel, and then ended up working in a surf shop. So my father came looking for me 6 months later and found me in a surf shop, took me back home, and sort of all the way back, a 4-hour journey, was highlighting how I'd ruined my education and what was I going to do with my life now. And so for me to silence him, I said, well, I'll join the military. I weighed about 130 pounds. I was about 5'7". I wasn't the sort of size that I am today. And, he told me I'd last 2 minutes, which for me was my driving force. But Monday morning, I went to his office, and literally the careers office was only 400 meters from where my dad's office was in Aldershot. And I walked across, and I started my application process.
One of the things about your journey that kind of really sparked my attention throughout reading the book and just learning more about you in general was just this pursuit of excellence. You had to do the next greatest thing. You had to achieve it. You had to accomplish it. Whereas that's not a common trait in people. That's actually really rare. And I don't know too much about your story growing up to the point where you joined the military, but for people who have any kind of trauma in their life, or any kind of need to prove a point, or need to prove their parents right, it seems like that's an underlying skill set or trait, not a skill set, a trait in their character that kind of makes them do it, where they're overachievers almost. Do you feel like you resonate with that at all?
I didn't as a child. I sort of look back. I get asked that quite a lot. There's that unrelenting pursuit of excellence, and I always wanted to be the best, but that didn't really start until the military, I think. There was the competitive angle anyway. My father, as we touched on, the soccer manager. And I played sports in school, and I was good. I wasn't the best. I got sports personality of the year. It wasn't because I was the best. It was because I took part in everything. I think my confidence came when I then joined the military, because in a short period of time, I joined at the age of 17 and a half, and within 18 months. I'd gone from 5'7" to 5'11" and 130 to 200 pounds. So physically, I was growing, but mentally, I was getting stronger as well. I had no aspirations of being in the Special Forces. I actually joined the Royal Engineers. My father was in the Royal Engineers, because he thought, well, if he's going to join the military, get what you can from the military, get a trade, because I think he probably thought I would probably do the minimum 3 to 5 years. And so when I joined the military, did my 10-week basic training, then we did the 12-week combat engineer training, and then I then went on my commando course. Each time I was doing these courses, mentally I was becoming more confident. I actually then realized, I am just as good as everyone around me, if not better. And I was becoming, top students. And then for me, that was it. I think because I was achieving them quite early on in my career, I then aspired to do that in every course that I went forward on. And so by the age of 21, I was now a para, commando, a diver, a PTI. I'd done every arduous course you could in the Royal Engineers in such a short period of time. So I think it was that period then that then led me forward on that unrelenting pursuit of excellence. So, if I was going to do anything, I had to do it to the best of my ability.
Yeah, you just really resonated so much with me, because during my own journey in the military, I joined young, but I had not a great childhood. And so for me, thank God for the military, honestly, because I would have been really, really lost had I not had it. And because, my situation was, if I don't succeed, it was a survival thing for me.
Yes.
Like if I don't win, if I don't achieve this course, if I don't pass this thing, I'm out on the street. I'm on my own, right? And so in this pursuit for me, I was just constantly trying to survive.
Yeah.
So I passed all the courses I possibly could. I mean, I became the number 12th female in the history of the U.S. Army to go through rappel master school.
Oh, wow.
So those things are cool, awesome. But at the same time, it wasn't because I was on my own, unmotivated to do it. It was, motivated to do it. It was just because it was a survival mechanism, I think, for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I wanted to prove myself. It was like a defense mechanism also.
Yeah,
I'm around all these tough people and tough guys. And, I wanted to kind of prove myself. So I always thought that was interesting, as I was going through your story, just you're such a rare breed to just constantly achieve and excel at everything you do. So
I think for me, it's interesting to hear about the survival. Yeah, because most people in the military, especially the special forces, come from humble beginnings. They don't have great upbringings, and so it's almost like when they find themselves in the military, they find friends for life. They find a community that they're actually comfortable with, who probably were misunderstood in the civilian sector as kids.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear that about the survival. For me, it wasn't about survival for me. I was just, like I said, I didn't have a plan in the military. A lot of the guys in the special forces, when we eventually go tier 1 special forces, all they've wanted, or even tier 2, I did that when I was 18, the commando forces. All they ever wanted to do since a young child is be in a Royal Marine or a commando or a parachute regiment.
Be like the G.I. Joe.
Yeah, the G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I never had any aspirations of doing that myself. But that sort of helped me, I think, along the way, because I never put myself under any self-induced pressure. When I actually ended up doing tier 1 special forces, there was guys there from the age of 6. That's all they wanted to do, and their career, their lives and paths have taken to this point where they're now just about to start selection. Whereas for me, I did it because I'd done every other arduous course, and I'd seen guys go, and I just thought, well, I want to be the best of the best. And so for me, I didn't go in, put myself under that pressure that the others did, and I sort of went in, well, if I pass, I pass. If I don't, I don't. And I think that helped me along the way as well.
I don't know about in the UK, but here in the US military services, almost without exception, the personality traits that make it through some of those tougher courses are a lot more humble.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that really worked out in your favor, because you definitely get those guys where they would go through the process, the workup, the training, the day zeros, to kind of be assessed. And even though they might have it in the bank for the physical stuff, it's almost always the purpose that they get not chosen to move forward is an ego thing, where they're not considering their brothers around them, where they're kind of more self-centered and, they just have this attitude that they're better, they're more macho, they need to be there. And it's those guys almost always don't make it through. So I wonder if that helped you.
Yeah, it did help me. Yeah, so maybe for the listeners to understand, so the Special Forces is tiered. So the Tier 2 Special Forces, that's where you really focus on being a team player. That your buds, your Rangers, your Green Berets, that's where they do all that. And for us in the UK, it's the Commando Course and the Parachute Regiment. And as you touched on, the Tier 1 Special Forces, one of the ethoses there is humility, and so some guys, they are on paper, they are rock stars, they are great operators. But when it comes to Tier 1 Special Forces, they're looking for something a bit different. You have to be self-driven or self-motivated. And some people like to have praise or being told by an instructor you're doing well, and they really struggle when they're not getting praise, because they don't know how they are fitting alongside all these other guys. And so there's a great book by a guy called Rich Davini, a good friend of mine, a SEAL Team 6 officer. It's called Attributes. And it basically touches on that. He said they had these rock stars coming in from the SEAL teams who on paper, that these guys are fit, they've done great tours, and were failing because they'd never understood how to deal with resilience. They'd always needed that praise as well. And so for me, I didn't need that. I'd been an instructor on the commando course, so I'd seen and I also knew what instructors were looking for. So you do have an idea of what they're looking for in selection, but when they're telling you you're not doing well, you just have to ignore it. They're playing mind games. But I remember my chief instructor on day one of selection, he had us in this room. There was 200 of us in there. And he said, look around the room and see who you think will be here in 6 months' time. And then, 6 months later, there's only 8 of us stood in there. And the other 7 weren't the 7 I thought. They, when you are there, you're quite stereotypical straight away. You're like, well, that guy looks fit. He looks like he can perform well. And as you touched on, you can be the fittest person in the room, but if you run that radio 30 miles across the mountain and you don't know how to turn the radio on, then you're useless to the team. So yeah, selection is the process of selection is the physical. There's being able to retain information, and then there's the personality traits that they're looking for as well. There's days where they just push on you, saying that just hand your notice in now. You're not going to make it, just to see how you react. And they put you under pressures that you probably wouldn't have expected in the tier 2s. And so they're the big differences I find.
How many of those guys, I don't know, maybe just from your course, or if you're aware of other courses that went through, when they were asked, like, hey, just hand in your notice, how many of them do you think actually did it?
A lot of the guys do.
Really?
A lot of it. So our process, our 6 month selection, the SPS is 9 months because we have the diving and the boating afterwards. So the first month really is all physical. They don't even know your name, the instructors. They don't need to know your name.
Do they give you numbers?
Yeah, you have numbers. Yeah,
Okay,
you have numbers, and then you basically running up and down the mountains with 70, 80 pound on your back for a month. So naturally, you're going to get those who physically weren't prepared. You're going to get those that have been injured along the way, and then some who then probably self-assess and thinking, Christ, this is just the start, So you lose a percentage there. And then our big one is the jungle. We then have 6 months in the jungle, and the amount of guys that just voluntarily withdraw because the instructors are telling them, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And they're seeing themselves, they're comparing themselves to other people. But I always remember the chief instructor saying, let us fail you, don't fail yourself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which was really powerful for me. It was like, until they've told you failed, you're still on the course.
Yeah.
And so 6 weeks in the jungle, we do 28 days solid in Brunei jungle. And
where is that for us lame people that don't know geography?
That's in Borneo in Indonesia.
Wow.
It's a beautiful jungle there, and we have a great relationship. Obviously, the UK has a great history, but the King of Brunei, we have a squadron of Gurkhas who work with the British Army from Nepal, and they protect him, and so we obviously get access to his jungles and stuff. So there's those relationships that's been going on for years.
You'll have to forgive some of my ignorance, because while I'm from the UK and I spent a bunch of time there, and I go there still now, and I have all my family there, there's still some things that I'm still learning about because I've spent so much time in the United States. But Gurkhas, from at least what I recall, are like pretty elite, right? They're
they come from Nepal, they're Nepalese, and they really helped during the jungle warfare back in the likes of Malaya and Borneo and things like that. And I know like the Japanese used to be scared of the Gurkhas. They have they're famous for these kukri knives, these knives that are arched, and we have a lot of traditions, and one of their traditions is every time they draw their kukri knife, they have to draw blood. But yeah, these guys are like.
So how do they do that?
Well, what they do now is they actually have a little pinprick on the bottom of their handle. The days of old, they used to just have to cut their hands. But these guys, their selection process for them is they come down from their villages, from the mountains. They have a selection process over in Nepal, and it's literally they are there in their sandals and flip flops. They have a netted bag which is attached to their head and just full of stones behind them, and they are running up and down the mountains. But yeah, there's a huge old tradition there between the Gurkhas and the British forces. But yeah, these guys are elite in themselves. Yeah.
Wow. So Dean's had the most crazy, incredible career, and I don't want to dive too much into the career because I think it speaks for itself. Just read the book for sure, and you're going to see some amazing stuff in the Netflix show as well, just to show you how cool he is, jumping out of helicopters and diving and all of that. But I want to fast forward a little bit to a time in your career where you got hurt.
Yeah.
You had an injury, and I think it was career ending for you, right?
Yeah, it was career ending. So for me, I joined at the height of the war on terror. So it was the busiest time in Special Forces history. So for me, I now found myself working alongside like-minded individuals, guys that, I could compare myself with. And I still was competing with them always, because coming from the Army to the SBS, I felt like I was always flying a flag. Always representing a unit. So I was representing the Army within the Special Boat Service. But yeah, we were literally doing first ever operational jumps doing hostage rescues. We were ticking all the boxes.
And you're going all over the world, like
all over
war
the world.
Zones everywhere, just for context for the audience here.
Yeah, war zones. We were diving on cartel boats in Colombia. Wow. We were rescuing hostages off the east coast of Africa. And so for me, I'd finally landed where I wanted to be. Life for me was great. And as you touched on, there was a curveball. I'd not long met my wife, Alana. I probably met her about 9 months before. And so happily dating, doing a job that I love. I was about to go back out to Afghanistan in another 2 weeks. And we're out in Oman doing pre-deployment training. So Oman is very deserty as well and has mountains, so very similar to the environments of Iraq and Afghanistan. And again, the relationship between the British and the Sultan of Oman, we get to use those training facilities. And I was doing a Halo jump, which is a high altitude, high opening jump. So unlike skydiving Halo, where you're free of the lines, this one you're actually still attached to the aircraft. It's called a static line. And you exit the aircraft at 15,000 feet, the parachute opens straight away. I mean, you can travel up to 50 kilometers or 30 minutes in the air to the target area. So it's a method of insertion that we have. And we did this on the previous tour, but we had new guys coming through selection. So we had to get them through this process. So the Sergeant Major was like, well, you guys go jump with them, which we did. And it was the third jump of the day. I exited the aircraft, and normally you do compulsory count and then check that you have a canopy. So I did my compulsory count, and then as I looked, I then realized I was looking the wrong way. I was looking up when my leg was actually caught in the line above my head. And so I was trying to clear my leg in time because I know that the parachute's just about to open, and I couldn't clear it, and it ripped my leg over my head and to my right. And so thankfully my heel cleared from the line, otherwise it could have taken your leg off. But straight away, I knew, I knew definitely I wasn't going on tour in 2 weeks' time, just purely because of the pain. And the pain was that bad, I was vomiting because of the pain. And
like while you're still in the air?
While I'm still in the air. And at 15,000 feet, the reason we jump at 15,000 feet on that chute is we don't need to use oxygen. That's the limits. Anything higher, you have to go on oxygen. So I'm still, hovering between 14 and 15,000 feet here. The air is so thin, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. I was vomiting. So, and when I was waking up, I could see that the guys in front of me. But for me, at least I had a canopy and I could start flying it. But my first concern was that I needed to land this because, if I land it badly, I could damage the good leg as well. And
how long were you in the air? So after your chute comes up, your leg's done.
Yeah.
How long is the time between you hurt your leg to the time you're on the ground?
About 30 minutes.
Oh,
so
my
I still
gosh.
had 30 minutes, yeah. So
and there's nothing that can be done. I mean, like, does anyone see you at this point and see that you're injured?
Well, I had comms, and I could come up on the radio and tell the guys I've hurt my leg, but I know what the answer is going to be. Well, let's have a look at hang in. Yeah, just wait to see what you do when you get on the ground. So actually, when I got to the DZ, I made an assessment of where the other parachuters were coming in, which was the best angle. And I landed it one-legged. It was a great, it was a perfect landing. But yeah, the damage sustained, the medic took me straight to the MRI. They reviewed it. I tore my ACL, my MCL, my lateral meniscus in my knee, my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep. And so literally the next day, from my buttock to my my Achilles was just black.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was it. I was basically told that, you need to go back to UK and you need to start your whole physical therapy with this. But then it then became a whole spiral of issues as well, losing MRI scans. We had the Icelandic volcano had gone off in 2010, which was grounding all air flights. And so actually I spent the first 4 weeks in Oman just on painkillers in a 5-star hotel. Which sounds great, but when you're in pain and the rest of the guys have gone to Afghan. So by the time I got back to UK, a few weeks later, Alana could see that I'd already lost weight. She could tell that even in my eyes, I'd sort of lost that spark. And then, a spiral of errors. They were losing medical documentation. It took me 44 weeks before I even got an operation.
One of the things that blew my mind in the books, this is actually from Alana's book, She Who Dares. Alana Stott is Dean's wife. She's coming on the show later. In her book, I was so frustrated on your behalf because when she was sharing some of the timelines that it would take for you to get basic treatments, surgeries, whatever, it was way longer than I would even imagine the American VA to be. And the American VA has such a bad rap. I mean, it's truly atrocious, how long it takes for people to get basic care. And you had to wait forever, it seems like, to get your care. So I'm not surprised, but at the same time, it's almost worse than the Americans. Yeah,
it is. I hear the Americans complain about the VA. I mean, actually, you guys got sometimes a lot better than us. I think there was an element of, it wasn't really the process, it was just individual errors as well within the medical system. And also the guys had already gone on tour as well, so their focus was on that. I had a knee operation a few years before when I was an instructor on the commando course. And actually from tearing my lateral meniscus, getting operated on, I got operated on within a week, and then 6 weeks later, I was back running 30 miles with the students. So, so I had that to compare to. I was like, well, why is this different now? I'm now in Tier 1 Special Forces. But it was just an element of more medical issues and errors within the system. And in the end, I almost threatened legal action before I could, because they can't let you leave the military until they've operated on you. So they're almost, already I was looking at, my career's ended, I'm looking at the next phase of my life. And I couldn't even start that until I had this operation. So they literally operated on me, and then weeks later, I was out.
Wow. Yeah. So again, reading, I'm actually pulling from Alana's book because I love her perspective of just what she went through. And I think it's the reason why it's so important for me to talk about this on this show. It's, we have a military undertone on this particular show, and we talk about mental health a lot. We talk about life after the military, transition, et cetera. And what was so profound for me was her perspective being the wife. Yeah. She's at home. I think you guys have a kid at this point, right? You got a baby?
We had Molly at this time.
Molly, and she was holding down the fort like the most incredible, badass wife ever. But when she got you home and she was very excited to have you back, she realized your spark was gone. Yeah. You were having a really hard time mentally. She talks so much about, that you kind of went down this spiral, and you were definitely having some issues with anger. And one thing that I honestly, I went through such a similar thing, and it made me cry reading this. And so I just want to read this for the audience because it just really paints the picture. So I'm going to cut from a couple pieces here, not going to read it all in one, but just so the injury had taken Dean's spirit. He had lost physical abilities, but it was the change in his mental state that was the toughest challenge. The anger started to show more and more. The smallest things would set him off, and it was reaching a boiling point. Dean's squadron had gone off to Afghanistan without him. During the tour, one of Dean's team was lost. He blamed himself, and somehow he believed if he had been on the tour that his friend would still be around. And then she goes on to say here, you're in the kitchen one morning, and Alana says, every morning I would wake up, and for the first few minutes I would be on eggshells until I worked out what mood he was in that day. One morning he got up and was excited to make breakfast. He was in a great mood, which was great to see. He was smiling and headed into the kitchen. After a few minutes, I heard a loud bang, followed by the awful sound of Dean shouting and hitting things. I went to the kitchen, nervous as to what I would find, what had happened. I walked through the door and looked around. I saw Dean. He was shaking with anger. His face was red and sweaty. The red mist had firmly descended. I tried to speak to him to calm down and to find out what had happened. Had someone called him? Had someone else been hurt? But no one else was here. What had happened? Just a million thoughts raced through my head. I looked at the floor, and there was a broken egg lying there. I looked back at him, and his eyes started to well up. I broke the egg, he said, and his lip trembled. I'm not a man. I can't even make eggs. What am I worth? I looked him in the eyes, wrapped my arms around him. I held him tight as if I was never letting go, and I promised him I would sort everything out. Everything was going to be okay. So for me, that was so profound because it's such a big deal to transition.
Oh.
It's so hard. And it's hard for families.
Yeah.
It's hard for soldiers, for service members. And it's like a whole kind of like frozen point in your life where you're like, what's going on next?
Yeah.
What do I do now? The part that really got to me was just like the fact that you had just broken an egg, and it's so simple. It doesn't mean anything, but to you, it's everything. And I've been in those moments myself so many times. And I hope this show helps service members to realize that you get beyond that.
Oh,
You get past that. So I just want you to touch on like that for a moment and what that was like for you from your perspective in that moment. And then like if you have any advice that you could share to move beyond that.
Yeah, so for me, I never wanted to leave the military. You know, I understand that some people will get what they want from the military and feel like, no, it's time for me to go and then voluntarily leave. For me, I felt it was stolen from me. You know, I literally was now in a unit, as I touched on before, where I belonged. You know, I was doing what I loved day in, day out. You know, the front cover of the book pretty much summarizes, the picture summarizes my career. You know, I was enjoying life. And I felt it was snatched away from me. I didn't want to leave. I was going to be a lifer, what they said. I would still be in now until I'm 55. And so for me, I never looked beyond that. I never had any aspirations of being a civilian. My life, my career was planned out until I retired. And so I felt that I'd been robbed of that. And then, you know, to add to that, as you touched on, you know, my guys were already out in Afghanistan. You know, we'd lost one of the guys as well. And so for me, I'd lost where I got to in my military was because of my physical robustness. You know, I now couldn't even run 100 meters without my knee giving way. And so I was going through what's known as an identity crisis. You know, I had a role and a purpose in the Special Forces. I knew what I was doing. You know, what is my role and purpose? How do I now fit in society? You know, how can I slot in? Because you've gone from being, you know, without sounding arrogant, you've gone from being like a rock star in the Special Forces to now no one even known you. You know, months before we were briefing the Prime Minister up on hostage rescues. Now it's like, yeah, doesn't really care. And it does feel like that. It does. I know a lot of people, and I've learned now that actually, you know, when you're in the military, and it's that culture, they make you feel like you are special. You know, I mean, there's nothing like this out there in the civilian sector. When in fact, there's plenty like that. For me to then not even feel recognized. But then, to do just a simple task, I thought I'll make breakfast. And even then I just, you know, it wasn't the egg's fault, it wasn't my fault really, but it just culminated to that point. So at the time, Alana saw it, I didn't see it. Well, it was that identity crisis. And Alana literally, as she says in her book, says, you know, she has aspirations of doing stuff, which she's done now, which is good, but she literally had to put her career and plans on pause to really sort of fix me. Yeah. But for your listeners, as you said, yes, you know, there's the dark places, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So for me, I just needed to sort of find, you know, I can't run anymore. Okay, I can't run, but what can I do? You know what I mean? And what are the skill sets I've taken from the military, and how can I use them in the civilian sector? Because again, on the transition, I have a lot of friends. I don't have a degree or a university degree, and a lot of my friends who are in are like, oh, I'm going to struggle when I get out. It's like, no, there's so many other skill sets you get from the military that are transferable to the civilian sector. It's just knowing how to use them. That's it.
Do you, in the UK, when you guys get out of the military, do they have like educational benefits?
Not like yours, no. No, we don't get anything like yours at all. No, we when you leave, you have a career transition workshop, and they'll put you on certain courses, but they're not. It's really up to you. Still, all they do is teach you how to write a resume or CV and do interview techniques, which is ironic because I had a friend who left a few years after me, and he came to me, and I was now very well established in the security sector, and I sort of put him onto a couple of clients, and then I said, well, you need to get an NDA. You need to. I started talking through some of the processes with him. He's like, well, what's an NDA? And then, he wanted to then start invoicing. I said, well, you don't invoice until the end, but yeah, also have a mobilization fee, put that in your proposal. He's like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh my gosh.
And I said, so what do you guys do still? And he said, still, all we do is CVs, resumes, and interviews. I said, well, I've never had an interview since I've left the military, and I've never given anyone my resume. So for me, I think there's other skill sets that they should be teaching these guys and girls when they're leaving, so that they when they are out there, understand the corporate world, understand the terminology is actually the same as the military. Sorry, the language is the same. It's just different terminology. It's just understanding what it is.
So one of my things that I've done my whole career, I mean, I joined the military as human resources. I was a recruiter. I've interviewed my entire life. I do it now. I always laugh because you just hit the nail on the head. For me, of something I work with soldiers to this day on is when they leave the military, yes, you need to work on your resume because most of these guys and girls, but a lot of the guys are putting on their infantry. I'm really good with a M16, an M4, a SAW, 249. Like they list out all their weapons. And I'm like, hey, that's really cool. But unless you're going law enforcement or some kind of, outdoor, sportsman, range instructor or something like that, like you need to overhaul all of this. Focus more on like leadership skill set, team management. I mean, just completely
skills,
completely overhaul the resume. Because it does make me laugh though when I see, I'm like, send me what you have, and I read through what they have so far before we work together, and it's just like, okay, this is we need to zhuzh this a little bit, make it a little bit civilian friendly.
Well, I was quite lucky because I had Alana, you see. So the military is great in the fact that they're like your mother and the father. They clothe you, they feed you, they pay you on time. They take all away those distractions so you can just focus on your job. I joke that I didn't know who provided the electric or the gas to the camp. I didn't really care. But thankfully for me, Alana is very entrepreneurial. And my transition ended up, although we touched about a couple of turbulent bits, was actually quite smooth because she picked up all those roles that the military did for me. I still don't know who we bank with. I just still don't know who provides the gas or the electric. Alana does that for me. But I joined the army at 17. I left at 33. I've never had to deal with the local city or the local council for things like that. So they're the things that I think that the UK military could be working on better. There's the career transition they can help, but also getting you set up for the civilian world, who you need to be able to speak to and get advice for. Because, again, Alana set up after her security company on her phone in 30 minutes, on company's house. She just had it submitted and it was done within a week. Whereas for me, it's like, have I ticked the right box? Have I done it correctly? So for me, we understood where our skill sets lay. She took that side of the house, and I just then focused on my skill sets, which was obviously at the time was the security sector. But even talking about the white collar industry, these corporates, I generally thought that everyone wants to help each other out, and Alana's like, no, the world out here is not the same as the military. These people, not everyone has your back. Not that everyone's bad. But she said, no,
they're all self-serving, for the most part.
And so I was like, so Alana felt like she also had to protect me on that, because the amount of times I've given stuff away for free, even just some of my IPs, or just, I'd go to meetings with people and they explain the situations, they've got security issues, and I'd give them the answers over a cup of coffee, and Alana's like, no.
Yeah.
What you
really
need to
lucky.
do is this, and this. But, so Alana deals with all the contracts for us. I don't even talk about money. And the way I best explain that, and this is where veterans could get a bit of advice as well, is that, we come from an environment where, if you're planning an operation in Afghanistan and you need a Spectre gunship, a UAV, we need 3 Black Hawks, we need a squadron of guys. And no one tells you the cost of that. It's automatically done for you in the military. So you don't really understand negotiating proposals.
And you just brought up like multi-millions of dollars and just that little configuration.
Multi-millions of dollars. You can have that. No one's telling me the bottom line or you need to put in a proposal or there's a bid for it. And so you go from that environment to the corporate world. And so I find it very difficult to talk about money because I don't see the value, especially with some of the stuff I do, especially with evacuations and rescuing people. I don't see a value on someone's life. I just need to rescue them.
Yeah.
Whereas Alana will then, she'll come in and take over, because a lot of people do take advantage of veterans because they genuinely want to help people and don't realize their value or their worth. Because when I first came out, Alana's like, I was like, no way you can charge that. She goes, why not? There's people charging more than that with less skill sets than you. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, so no concept of like...
No concept.
Yeah, money and like just business operations in general, et cetera. Yeah. And that's such a crazy, awesome thing for you that you had Alana, because so many people come out and they're just completely on their own, where they don't have families, right? They join young, they never got married. Obviously, like relationships in the military next to impossible. Yeah. And they come out and they're literally isolated by themselves. And that's where the failure rate happens. So do you have any advice for service members that are leaving, just on like, setting up community, or any tips to help them kind of land on their feet?
Yeah, I think for me is, try and get as much advice from people who've done it before you, if that makes sense. I remember we went to this career transition workshop, which the SES and the SBS did, and basically it was okay, but they got 4 ex-veterans in who are very successful. These guys now have very successful businesses. And I was like, okay, that's great, but that's now put me under extreme pressure because I'm like, you've just given me these success stories. I want to understand. And I knew one of my friends up there, and he had now a multi-million-pound security company, but I knew that he'd failed 4 other companies before. I'm like, I want to know about that. What were the lessons you took away from those? Because that's what I mean. I think some veterans get overwhelmed because they see other veterans, especially in like now's world of media. They see all these other veterans doing well, or they see other guys doing well in the corporate industry, and that puts them under pressure as well. And so for me, is like, get as much advice from those around you. What's worked, what hasn't worked. If you were to do it again, what would you do differently? Very much a hot debrief is what we did in the special forces. Just take that into the corporate world. And for me, my biggest thing I would say to them is be confident in your abilities, because everyone, again, we don't. I came out with no degree, but my skill sets were way above my peers in the corporate world, just because of the other skill sets we had. I remember. And the pin drop for me once, I took a UK trade investment, oil and gas, to Libya to make Libya oil and gas. And basically we had 4 huge oil companies pitching to Libya oil and gas, just as it was about to open their oil terminals again. And these guys were on 6-7 figure wages, and they're representing these oil and gas companies. Of the 4, 3 of them just, their presentation wasn't in order. They were stuttering with their words. And I'm like, my God, what I mean? Whereas in the military, you're taught to present in front of guys. You do presentations all the time. You get critiqued on it. Yeah. And for me, I was like, wow, you don't need an education. It's just doing the basics. So find out, as you said, with your CV, it's good that you can fire an M60, but what other transferable skills have you got? And because you'll be very surprised. We're now in a society where people don't like to talk in big groups. They don't feel comfortable. I'm very comfortable. I'll speak in front of 10,000 at the O2 Arena, or I can speak to a group of 30. People don't understand how to deal with failure, or when they have plans. These corporate worlds, they have plans and they don't know what to do when it doesn't go to plan. That's pretty much the military inside out. Things never go to plan, but we're always reactive to situation changes, and we always want to achieve that aim. So sort of take on board the skill sets you have, believe in yourself, don't compare yourselves to other veterans or to other people. You're unique yourself. The world is your oyster. The military is such a great, although I had a bad year the last year, I very much still believe that there's so much you can get from the military that help you. They're at the moment they're talking about Rishi Sunak, who's the Prime Minister. If he gets elected on 4th of July, he's on about bringing in national service again, which is like the draft here. And so for me, I think it's a good thing, because at 17, I didn't know what I was going to be doing. And even if I left 3 years later, there was so much I got in that short period of time. So, so take on board, you've got the skill sets. And yeah, just believe in yourself really. And then find a community. You know, don't find yourself on your own. You know, unfortunately, these people that we hear with veteran suicides, they tend to have just drifted off on their own and had no one to communicate with. So stay in touch. It's very easy nowadays to stay in touch. You know, when my dad left, there was no mobile phones, and so it was probably difficult for that sort of generation. But now there are tools out there. You know, there are non-profits. There are groups that help guys and girls get jobs. So yeah, just utilize those resources.
There's a couple things I want to make sure we touch on. So one is you did some amazing work with I think it was Prince Harry and a few other people. I think the initiative was called Heads Together. Is that right? Yeah,
Heads Together was it was a mental health campaign that him, his brother, and Kate were doing. Yeah, and so
is that still in operation?
That's still in operation, yeah. So the Royal Foundation was set up for ideas that William, Harry, and Kate and them had back in the day. And there's three arms to it. There's the veteran arm, and so Invictus Games, which everyone knows of, that was born out of the Royal Foundation. So they take an idea, they develop it, and then it moves on. So there's the veteran side, there's the conservation side, and then there's the mental health side. And so, yeah, Harry and I met each other on a JTAC course back in 2007, and we've been friends ever since. And when I left the military, we were doing a lot of non-profit stuff behind the scenes. But there was an incident in my book. You know, it wasn't an incident. I single-handedly evacuated the Canadian embassy out of Libya on my own, 18 military and 4 diplomats. No big deal. And came home from that. Alana had told me I'd only been home 21 days in a whole 365-day calendar, which was where the second pin dropped. I was actually still trying to match the adrenaline rush of the Special Forces without coming to terms with the fact that I'd left. And so I decided I always wanted to do a world record. And so I did a world record attempt. Never cycled before. I cycled 20 miles and applied for the world record for the world's longest road, which runs from southern Argentina to northern Alaska, which is 14,000 miles. All
of this after the military, by the way. So for those of you at home, like, listen, life does not stop when you leave the military. Like, this guy, two Guinness World Records,
Two Guinness World Records, yes. The world's longest road. And at the age of 40, I said I would do that. And so Harry, Alana, and I had done a lot in the philanthropy area before, especially around veterans. And so I rang him up. I told him I was doing this challenge. And him and his brother Kate were just about to launch Heads Together, as you touched on. But Heads Together, you know, I'd seen mental health firsthand in the military with some of my friends, but I wasn't aware how big it was throughout the whole of society. You know, postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, veterans, the whole spectrum. And so, yeah, that was the challenge. That was the campaign that we did this bike ride for. I set a target of £1 million. The world record was 117 days. A year later, I set off. I finished it in 99 days. Became the first man in history to do it under 100 days. But more impressively, and Alana will touch on, she raised, you know, over $1.4 million for the charity as well.
Huge. I mean, it's so amazing. It just gives me goosebumps to think about all of this incredible stuff that you did after you left the military. I mean, your life, it just kind of bringing it full circle from that moment in the kitchen where you broke this egg, and it just was like the tipping point, or the snapping point of like releasing all of this just, you know, mess inside you and feeling like a failure too, going on to raising over £1 million and breaking 2 world records and, you know, clearing embassies and starting security firms and you know, hanging out with Prince Harry, going to the royal wedding. Are you kidding me? Like, just all of these incredible things. Like, that's amazing. Congratulations.
I think it's, you know, I wouldn't be, you know, I always say take a positive from a negative. My negative was me leaving the military.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be here chatting to you. I wouldn't have world records. I wouldn't have Netflix shows, and you know, I wouldn't have a very successful security company. I wouldn't probably have the family that I have now either. So that's why I say you sometimes end up in a dark place, but it's not dark for too long. You know, I think if you just surround yourself with the right people, you know, they'll show you the light. This too shall pass.
This too shall pass. It's kind of my mantra myself, because I mean, I go through it. You know, we all go through it. Just this too shall pass.
Yeah.
So amazing. One of the last things I wanted to touch on is Alana in the book describes this moment where you guys have, to be honest, I'm single. So I was like, I want to have a moment with some guy where we're drinking bottles of wine in the kitchen and talking all night long. But she has this moment with you in the book where I think the exact sentence was, it's going to be death or it's going to be divorce. And, that is so heavy. And, the military, I don't know about the UK, but in the US, the military divorce rate is like 80%.
Yeah.
So high. And obviously, for obvious reasons that relationships in general are just so challenging, especially when you're in roles like you were in, where you're just constantly deployed. You're on constant training exercises and you're always gone. And with Alana, I mean, she is like the coolest wife ever, I'm telling you. But, she had, I think, 2 kids at the point where you were about to leave the military. Is that right? You guys had 2 children?
No. So I left the military in May 2011. That's when I left, and Molly was born in June 2011.
Okay.
So it was after. Yeah.
Got it. So they have 3 today, but at the time, so just 1. So she was like holding down the fort, running all of the things at home. I mean, she's incredible, and she's kind of feeling like isolated on her own. And while she'd figured out life by herself, I think that was like the catalyst, at least from her perspective, of like. At this point, why do I need you? And so talk to me about that, because my hope is that from this conversation, because you guys have obviously figured it out and you've come so far and you guys have accomplished incredible things together, like the ultimate power couple here. Tell me about that, because I want to help people save their marriages. Yeah,
I think for Alana, it was probably her identity crisis. She'd gone from very successful. She was a bank manager, the world of finance, and then put everything on pause to help me and pick me up. And so straight away we were doing security, and it was actually a lack of communication. It got to the point, so I just finished the Canadian Embassy evacuation. I came home, and my normal standard operational procedure would be charge my phone, launder my clothes, and get ready for the next task. And Alana was my business partner as well with this. Tasks would come in and she'd send me away. There had been occasions where I'd literally landed in the morning from a task. Alana's given me my second passport and another bag at the airport, and I'm flying off again. And so when we sat down that evening, my father had died that year as well, and I literally buried him and flew out the next day. I literally disconnected from society. And I came back from the Canadian Embassy, and we realized I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. So she hadn't even seen me. And so we sat down, we drank 2 bottles of wine, and then, tears started flowing, talked about my father. And then I soon realized that actually she thought I wanted to be away, and I thought that she wanted me to be away to be building money for the family. When in fact, she also had another business in property developing, when really I didn't actually have to leave if I didn't want to. So yes, I was trying to match that adrenaline rush that I had when in the Special Forces, about coming to terms with the fact that I'd left. But more importantly, we just miscommunicated. We hadn't really sat down and spoke. I didn't actually want to be going away. And so, I took a sabbatical from the security industry, and then, but chapter 16 in my book is called Dead or Divorced. That was the conversation we were having. So we then realized now that, if I now go out the door, it's fine, because I know Alana's green lit it. We now work everything we do together. So we now, as a family, we have 5 with the 3 children. Obviously, the youngest is about 20 months, so she doesn't really get a say. But the other 2 children, we sit down on everything. More recently, the Israel evacuations, we sat down with the kids. They're like, Dad's going to have to go. It's fine. We get the nod from them all. Whereas before, it was almost quite selfish, And the Special Forces, when you're in the Special Forces, is a selfish role. You deploy for 6 months, your pager goes off, you could be away, you can't tell your wife, and they're expected to stay at home and sort of run everything. Yeah, and so for me, that's fine when you're in this military, because that is your job. But when you're in the private security sector, you're almost volunteering to do that. And so, that's where we'd got the yin and yang balance wrong, myself and Alana. And where we do now, I see a lot of couples, especially when they see maybe one of the couple, especially the women, unfortunately, because a lot of women have successful careers, and they put their careers on hold to start a family or whatever, but then their husbands are carrying on with their careers. And if you're not really working together or communicating, there can be a lot of resentment when he's becoming successful and you feel like you've lost your own identity. So that's what Alana and I do as well. We literally do everything together, because I think both of you, as you touched on a power couple, you can both be successful with your own careers. It's just knowing when to pause and when to support the other one, rather than just one just going off.
I love that in your book, you also, as you're talking about the death or divorce, in chapter 16, the thing in that for me was the communication element, that you guys were living like two entirely separate existences. And then when you sat down and had this deep conversation, which 2 bottles of wine, one night of just talking till the sun comes up, literally was this catalyst for you guys to kind of start this new chapter and realize just how much you did love each other and want to be together and supported each other. You just thought you were doing what the other person wanted, but never had that conversation. So I think that's a key takeaway, at least for me, is just having a conversation and talking.
Having a conversation. Another thing, in not in my book, maybe in Alana's book, one thing we do annually is from the moment we met, every New Year's Eve, we have a dreams book. Or we have a goals book, something we always wanted to do. And so we still always bring that out each year as well to make sure that we are still on track and you don't lose sight of what you've always wanted to do as well. So.
Well, Alana said in her book as well, there was a moment that stood out to her when you guys had first started dating, I think, and it was around like her career, like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And she was like, coming up with all these different ideas, and but it wasn't necessarily what she wanted to do. I think you corrected her. I forget exactly what you said, but the way you phrased
when
it.
I met her, she where we used to live in Aberdeen is like the oil and gas capital of Europe. So it's like the Houston of Europe. So very male-centric, very oil-driven. And so for a young female growing up there, it's quite hard. But she then, she was a bank manager at 21. She's very, very driven, as you know. But when I met her, I said, well, is this what you've always wanted to do? Have you always wanted to be a bank manager? And it's when we first started dating. And she said, no, I always wanted to be a spy. So I think her favourite series at the time was 24, but she doesn't let me watch that with her. Could always start correcting Jack Bauer on his pistol handle.
Goes.
And I said, well, what have you done about being a spy? She goes, oh, nothing. No, but a lot, especially in that environment, a lot of people just tell her to take her head out the clouds. And so the next day, I turned up at the bank where she was working, and I had an envelope, and it had the joining instructions for MI6, which is like your CIA, with the phone number of the chief instructor, who was a friend of mine. And I said, well, look, start your process.
Yeah.
And she's like, wow. So she did, and actually she got all the way through. She failed on the family section, so God knows who I've married into with her family history. But I think for her, she then realised, well, this guy's actually going to push me rather than hold me back. And so, that's the way we both really then fell in love with each other, because, some of the stuff I do, these bike rides and, the evacuations, a lot of these are Alana's, decisions, not mine.
And that's one of the things I love about her so much, is because she's a total badass. And I mean, like, even on the show, Toughest Forces on Earth, that's currently on Netflix for those of you still listening, she was the nutritionist on that show.
Yeah.
And so she was incredibly invested in the performance of all of the guys on the show. And, she's running the security company. I mean, she's been through a lot of these courses. She's like really neck and neck with you. You might be, I mean, come on, she might be cooler than you.
I think you need to find a partner who's going to challenge you, who's going to push you. I think with Alana, she's, the reason she got into nutrition was actually when I was doing the bike ride, I was going to be burning between 9,000 and 12,000 calories a day. And she was checking out these nutritionists, and they just weren't really understanding me.
Yeah.
A lot of it now is about...
or military training.
Yeah. It's all about these sport gels and things, which is a short burst. When she's like, no, I generally eat normal food. And so she trained as an advanced sports nutritionist to help me during my training process and for the bike ride. And we filmed the first episode on Toughest Forces on Earth, which was... because it was the first episode, the production team was still trying to find their feet, and there were days where literally we would just have half a burrito, and we'd done like 2 hours of PT or been diving for 4 hours, and I'm like, I came back from there skinny, and Alana's that right, she tends to like take a visual view of me and then he needs help.
Yeah.
And
she
volunteered.
A bag of Doritos.
It doesn't work for me. Yeah.
Wow. Every show that I film, I always talk about charity. So I know we talked about the one earlier, but are there any charity organizations that you'd like to shout out that you encourage service members to check out?
Yeah, so the ones for me at the moment is Heroic Hearts. Coming from the UK, we're about 15 years behind the US when it comes to, because even marijuana is illegal there. So when I did my bike ride, I was trying to promote the message that physical activity helps your mental state. It did for me. I thought, that's why I say to veterans as well, sometimes as well, you come from an environment where you've got gym access all the time and things like that, and then you then just become busy as a civilian and you sort of neglect that. But there is a linkage between being physically active and helping your mental state. So I was promoting that massively on the bike ride. And then I got introduced to the plant medicine here in the US. So I've actually, your first podcast to know this, actually, I actually went out last November to Mexico and did the ibogaine and DMT, but I've never smoked before in my life, never done any recreational drugs. And for me, I've seen the impact that's had on veterans and their spouses as well, which Heroic Hearts do. So I now sit on the board of Heroic Hearts, and Alana helps now fundraise for them. But for me, it's just what it highlighted to me. I've been telling people that physical activity helps your mental state. It does. It's a short-term relief, but actually the plant medicine takes you. The way I explain it is you're like a pan on a flame. You do physical activity, you take the lid off and the steam escapes, but you're putting it back on. So it's then going to start building up again. What the plant medicine does, it takes you completely off the flame and off. So for me, it's something I've only just started to know more about, but I'm seeing the effects it's having on veterans and veteran suicide. There's been people going there, with their suicide notes and then just coming back, and the wives and families automatically seeing the changes. So for me, I want to help start promoting that message. I was very fortunate. I didn't have any addictions or PTSD, but as you touched on the book, there was still anger issues. For me, I'm very comfortable in environments that are hostile. What upset me is when I come back to the Western world and I see...
You're the hostile.
Yeah, no, but I see people arguing about the most stupidest of things, and compared to what's going on outside the world. And it tends to be when someone beeps their horn. Someone beeps their horn. I used to go from red... I get out of the car. I did it in Scotland. I dropped my daughter off in nursery and I was coming out. I was coming out and the guy was beeping his horn. And next thing you know, Lana sees me, I've got this guy who just ripped through his windscreen. And I'm just like, and then I apologize, the red mist just goes. Yeah. So there was those underlying issues, but which the ibogaine and the medicines been amazing for me. Yeah. So my shout out would be to Heroic Hearts.
You couldn't, I haven't done that yet, but I really want to. I've had so many people tell me that will change my life. And so that's, I think, next for me is I really want to go try that.
And as a veteran, it's
I would
free
love
for
to.
you. Yeah.
Sign me up, honestly, sign me up.
Speak to Alana, she's the one. Yeah.
I know. Well, actually, I did talk to her about it, and she told me the medicine calls you. Yeah. And I have such a crazy story about how even Alana and I got connected in the first place because the statement "the medicine calls you" it could not be more true. It's just been telling me it's time, and I feel like it's time. So I'm gonna go check it out, and I'll let you guys know how it goes.
I think for me, with the plant medicine, what puts off the special forces community or the veteran community is almost, it looks quite hippie-ish. And that's really what puts up. So with people like myself, and I went to an event where there was some SEAL Team 6 guys that have done it, and they answered all my questions for me. I did no research. I literally said yes, and I went the following Friday.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't listen to podcasts. I didn't do any research, and typical me.
I listen to this one.
I listened to this one, but I just jumped straight in. Yeah. I was just like, well, let's see what it do. And Alana's very spiritual anyway, and so if she'd gone away and did it before me, then I probably wouldn't listen. I had to go myself and then come back. And so, for me, I was worried about, will I lose my physical ability, which I use for doing world records. And actually they said, no, it cleans you up. It just makes everything a lot clearer. So like I said, I didn't know much about it, but now very much will fly the flag for plant medicine. Well,
you sold me at taking the pan off the flame, because I feel like that's what I need. I need to be taken right off the flame.
Yeah, because you do. You can. There are ways of relieving that anger short term. Yeah. But you need to start then looking at long term, and that's what it was with Alana. Like I said, I didn't have PTSD or any addictions, and life was quite good. Got a family, but there were those moments, and it'd probably be about 2 or 3 times a year that red mist would come down. And Alana said there's nothing no one could do or say when that happens.
Yeah.
And so that was always her fear. And then we actually had, we have a podcast called Behind the Scene, and we had, I'd heard about ayahuasca, but we had Amber and Marcus Capone from the Vets on, and he talked about how he tried ayahuasca, psilocybin, but then his last resort was ibogaine, which was a weekend, which is perfect for me because I have such a busy life. I can't. Ayahuasca is like 8 days off. I can't do that. I haven't got time for that. And so I literally needed the most powerful thing. But Amber talks about how straight away, as soon as she picked him up, she broke into tears. She knew it had worked.
Wow.
And that's the same with me. Alana dropped me off at San Juan Capistrano train station, and I was on the way down. I was like, I don't need this. I'm just doing it for you and the kids. I was already, resisting. And then 72 hours later came back. I was 8 pounds lighter, and then Alana, just broke down in tears.
No way.
Yeah. She said, that's the Dean I met.
Oh my gosh.
Aberdeen, before the injury. And so, it's powerful. It's hard to explain if you haven't done it, but definitely worth looking into.
I'm going to. I will report back and let you know. Anyway, amazing. Well, next up, I've got your wife. She's out there waiting for us. So I'm gonna switch over to her. But thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Thank you.
I'm definitely gonna have you back on. And I also want to shout out, I wore this England.
I was about to say you had the England top. Yeah, I saw that.
Just because you guys were coming on. But what's crazy is you have Portland, Oregon, and that is such a huge part of my life.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I spent my mother married an American Mormon missionary that's from Grants Pass, Oregon. Oh, cool. So she's from Sheffield. Yes. And so they married, and it's not my dad. My dad lives in Nottingham still, but they married and moved to Oregon. And so I spent most of my life, a good from 16 to I was in the National Guard, so I spent a lot of time there. My last duty station was Portland, Oregon.
Oh, amazing.
So that's crazy. That wasn't planned. That wasn't planned.
That wasn't planned at all, no.
Yeah, so it's very, very cool. But anyway, I'm so thankful. Where can people find you? And just a reminder for everybody, Dean Stott, Relentless is the book. Netflix, Toughest Forces on Earth. Where else can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram and Facebook, or you can go to my website, deanstott.com. There'll be a few announcements coming out there soon as well.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to go watch the rest of the show. I got to go to your premiere the other night.
You for coming.
That was so cool. And you really are, quite frankly, the coolest guy I've had on the show so far. So anyway, thank you.
Only on episode 10 or 11. They'll get cooler guys, don't worry.
I'm excited. Yeah. Well, I don't know, because you guys are a power couple, and that's what we really care about. I like the women on the show too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching.